Right now, a movement called Land Back is gaining momentum across the United States. Indigenous communities are actively reclaiming stewardship over ancestral homelands. To understand the weight of that reclamation, we have to look at the exact machinery used to strip those lands away. In the 19th century, the United States operated under manifest destiny, the belief that the nation was ordained to expand across the entire continent. Clearing the land for that expansion required a new legal framework. In 1830, the government passed the Indian Removal Act, weaponizing the law to force the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole from the American South. This map shows the direct result of that legislation. Hundreds of thousands of Native people were forced to march westward into a concentrated zone in modern-day Oklahoma. During these relocations, known as the Trail of Tears, exposure, disease, and starvation killed thousands. The United States government utilized this calculated legal machinery to strip away physical sovereignty. This state-sponsored displacement ended the era of tribal independence in the East and set the stage for decades of intense conflict in the West. As the frontier pushed further west, indigenous nations mounted a fierce defense of their remaining territories. This resistance sparked a prolonged series of clashes known as the Indian Wars. Native coalitions secured major tactical victories against the U.S. Army. Under leaders like Sitting Bull, they successfully defended their homelands, notably wiping out General Custer's forces at the Battle of the Little Bighorn in 1876. The federal government responded with overwhelming military suppression. By 1890, the U.S. Army effectively crushed the armed uprisings, a campaign that culminated in the Wounded Knee Massacre, where troops killed hundreds of Lakota men, women, and children in the freezing snow. The military suppression of the 1890s secured the American frontier. This victory allowed the federal government to move its campaign of expansion from the battlefield into the home and the classroom. With Native nations confined to reservations, federal policy entered an invasive new chapter. The United States government began the work of systematically dismantling indigenous cultural identity from the ground up. The government targeted children as the primary agents of change. Beginning in the late 1800s, federal authorities forced thousands of Native youths into a boarding school system designed to sever them from their cultural roots. This map displays the sheer scale of the operation. Over the next half-century, the government established hundreds of these institutions spread across the entire United States. Children were physically severed from their families and transported across state lines. Once inside, they were strictly forbidden from speaking their indigenous languages, forced instead to adopt English as their primary means of communication. This institutional erasure inflicted deep generational trauma. However, by grouping thousands of students from diverse nations together and forcing them to adopt a common language, the government inadvertently provided the tools for intertribal organization. This shared experience under federal policy created a unified generation equipped to challenge the United States within its own legal and political systems. The first major shift in legal standing occurred in 1924. Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act, officially recognizing all Native Americans born in the U.S. as citizens and providing a new platform for legal resistance. By the 1960s and 70s, that legal leverage met intense grassroots activism. The American Indian Movement, or AIM, took the fight directly to the streets, blending cultural pride with aggressive political demands. Activists staged high-stakes standoffs, including a 71-day occupation at Wounded Knee, to demand that the United States government honor its long-neglected treaties. This relentless pressure led to the passage of the 1975 Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. This law formally recognized tribal governments, allowing them to contract directly with the federal government to manage their own healthcare, education, and social programs. Returning administrative power to the tribes provided the critical legal mechanism needed to dismantle the era of forced assimilation. Native nations could finally begin governing their own people and resources. Native American identity is thriving in the present day. These nations are moving past the legacy of the 19th century to actively construct independent futures on their own terms. Tribal nations are repairing the specific damage of the boarding school era through aggressive indigenous language revitalization programs. They are ensuring the next generation can speak the words their grandparents were once punished for using. This chart illustrates the financial reality behind that cultural push. Over the last 4 decades, revenues from diverse, sovereign tribal enterprises have grown exponentially, providing the capital necessary to fund their own schools, healthcare, and legal defense. Armed with legal standing and economic leverage, the Land Back movement is actively reclaiming the ancestral homelands lost during the 1830 Removal Act. Through 2 centuries of military suppression, forced relocation, and cultural erasure, indigenous populations adapted their strategies at every turn. They transformed catastrophic loss into a unified political bloc, proving that a targeted nation can battle a superpower to reclaim its identity, its land, and its future.